Good afternoon, dear distinguished guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me to welcome you in the Professors Club of the University of Debrecen. We are very pleased to greet in our company Professor Hartmut Neumann from Freiburg, Germany, invited by Professor Pfliegler, not the first occasion this time, so we've met already. Nice to meet you again in Debrecen. We appreciate very much that you accepting Professor Pfliegler's invitation could come to give us a lecture on one of your favorite topics. But this evening is a special occasion, offering not only a scientific experience, but a beautiful music program as well, as you could see from the brochure. We are lucky enough to listen to Professor Neumann's play violin, following by the performance of our colleagues from Debrecen, singing Dr. Daniel Nagy, with company on the piano by Eszter Bojti, and the bailing piano by István Altorjai, who is well known in the Professors Club. This program is going to be introduced and moderated by Professor Pfliegler, who has been in very close connection with Professor Neumann for many years. So the only task left for me to give the microphone over to Professor George. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And first of all, welcome everybody. I'm really very happy that so many of you accepted our invitation, and I'm very grateful to Professor Oláh that she made it possible to have this little lecture and this concert in this beautiful villa of Kenesi. This is a great honor for me, especially, and I think to all of us who are talking now and playing music this afternoon. Professor Hartmut Neumann is, as you can see, professor of the famous German University of Freiburg, and he is especially well known about rare neuroendocrine tumors, kidney diseases. He published several publications in the New England Journal of Medicine and other really distinguished and high-ranking journals. And besides this, as you heard, he is also a talented musician. He is devoted to have connections to Central Europe universities, and he is an honorary professor of the University of Temesvár and of Budapest Semmelweis University. And his generosity could be seen also that last year he gave us, I think, more than 50 excellent and first-class beds. So if you come to the Department of Medicine and the building B, which is the hematology, and where my chair is also the division of rare diseases, you will see that the patients are now in these new beds, which are really comfortable, and they pray in the evenings for Professor Hartmut Neumann. That we have to live in such a comfortable, lay in such comfortable beds. I don't want to use more of your time, and I give them the microphone and the words to Professor Hartmut Neumann, who has given us a talk on familial renal carcinoma and Pheochromocytoma, two interesting rare diseases, which will be followed, as Professor Eva mentioned, by the music performance of the colleagues. Please, Professor Neumann.
Professor Oláh, Dr. Pfliegler, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be in Debrecen, and the weather is nice, and we have spent 1 week in Hungary again, and I love Hungary, I must confess so. And today we do science and music, yeah, it's a good combination, I think. I love both. And when I saw this first slide, yeah, I remember history is present also in this picture. We have today 7th of June, and 7th of June was a public festival in Germany because it was the uprising against communism in 1953. Then I was 5, I cannot remember, but I remember very well when my mother said, oh, look, this Hungarian people, they fight against communism. That was in 56. Then I was 8, and I remember very well. And also being a conservative German person, I may say so, I always keep in mind how important Hungary was to open the Iron Curtain. So thanks to your country and to your people. The first picture shows this, but also this. Do you know where this is? It's in Hungary. I saw in Eger, yes. You see, somebody is looking to the sky here. Yeah? So it's science in the Esterhazy High School, or how do you say? And this was shown to me by Professor Pfliegler. Thank you very much. That was last year. So my topic today is familial Pheochromocytoma, familial renal cancer, and I'm an endocrinologist and a nephrologist. I have also been trained as a full pathologist, so all these diseases are a part of my interest, and what I want to show you in 20 minutes, should not be longer, the major results which I obtained recently, and also the main message should be what can we learn by working with patients who have rare diseases. Is it something we should be aware of, or is it something you can neglect widely? Of course, the message is no, it's important. This was a patient who came to me about 2 weeks ago. So it's a real case and a recent case. So the question is still not completely solved, but this was what he came with. He was 48 years old, he is, and he told me, I have a terrible family history and I feel unhappy about that, and I would be happy not to share the features of my family. So the father died and had clear cell renal cancer. I saw the histology report, so that was known. And he told me that the father was fairly young, about 55. And he told me that the grandfather died also. And he had renal cancer with metastasis. But he died, the father died by stomach cancer. The grandfather died by renal cancer and metastasis. He has no siblings, so nothing is known about this renal disease in the current generation. And there is no other cancer in this family, and the patients were clinically normal. These patients come and want to know their risk for getting a disease, their risk for having a reduced lifespan. So I told him there are 2 approaches. One approach is clinically, and one approach is genetics. We all live in the area of genetics, and genetic diagnosis becomes more and more important, either for confirmation or for exclusion of diseases. I show you what we did as a background, why such patients come and contact me. This is a different disease. This is not the disease of this man. You see, it's autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, very common disease, and called with the abbreviation ADPKD, and there are 2 types because we have 2 genes, and you see the enlarged kidneys with abundant cysts, and you see some remnant functioning tissue, enough tissue in this case to have normal renal function still, and you have here the liver also occupied widely by cysts. So this is a very typical picture of autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease. But is this a disease at risk for cancer? You see, here's a patient who has multiple cysts, you can say polycysts you cannot count, and he has a tumor here, and this tumor was renal carcinoma. So it can occur in this disease. So I was given a huge grant by a company, Fresenius, and they have a scientific branch, and the Fresenius Foundation gave me money for polycystic kidney disease, and we had to be aware what can be published, what can we do with the money. And this is the message of Dr. György, a colleague of mine, and it's in press. And I must read to you because it's the shortest way to know what we did. We have looked at 240 patients who have been transplanted mostly in Freiburg, and when you have polycystic kidney disease, you have a space-occupying kidney, and that must be removed to implant the transplant. And therefore, we have many patients with these operation surgical specimen analyzed and investigated in pathology. And the total was, because there were some bilateral removals, 301 kidneys. And what have we found? There was 12 of 240, meaning 5% or 1 in 20 patients presented with malignant renal lesions respectively. And 8 of 12 of these patients had undergone dialysis prior to surgery. We know that dialysis is a risk factor to produce kidney cancer. So, but not all. We found papillary renal carcinoma, we found clear cell renal carcinoma, in less, more in papillary non-invasive urothelial cancer. Regarding all lesions, 6 of 13, that means 1/3 patient, had more than one histological finding, pathological histological finding in their kidneys. In 2 cases, metastases were removed. So some patients had even metastatic renal cancer. But all these patients, ridiculous to say, have been transplanted. When diagnosed with the kidney cancer, before the transplantation would have been done, then they go on a waiting list. And they all have the burden with 5 years waiting. So, luckily, most of these patients get in the same procedure, removal of the kidney and transplantation, and days later the diagnosis came in that they had cancer in the kidney. So, this is not trivial. This patient may have any risk in this scenery, but he has no cysts in the kidney. But I want to tell you. Another image is shown here. You see cysts, but there is much preserved kidney tissue, and you see a tumor here. And this is very typical for another separate other disease named von Hippel-Lindau disease. In von Hippel-Lindau disease, you can have several tumors, you can have these large tumors, and you can have bilateral tumors, and you can have multiple tumors. So many cysts are not seen in many VHL, von Hippel-Lindau disease. And let us have a look here to answer the question for this patient. That means the prevalence of the components of von Hippel-Lindau disease, which is retinal angiomatosis, Pheochromocytoma, brain tumors or spinal tumors, and kidney tumors. A challenge, again, to many fields of medicine, and you can see the first tumor which occurs is retinal angiomas, followed by Pheochromocytoma, by CNS tumors, and by kidney lesions. So the patients had not these lesions, and our person who came to me had no history for this. So it's unlikely, but it must be considered. Why? We should also have another case. He was 30 years old, male, and a VHL patient, masses in both kidneys, and he had no metastasis, but the masses were large, and in both kidneys so large that we decided to remove both kidneys. So he is on a waiting list. So again, a challenge, what can we do for him? How is the risk for pharmaceutical agencies which he needs after transplantation? We have studied together with David Goldfarb in Cleveland a number of patients who had Familial disease and who had renal transplantation. And you see the graft survival in the cases is nearly equally or even better than the control cases. So that means that when we have patients with Familial disease, with many tumors, and they get anti-rejection treatment, they have not an enhanced risk for tumor growth in other organs. So, and the graft is also with normal expectancy, and it should be immediately transplanted. Still, even in my university, they put these patients on a 5-year interval. They give them the burden to wait, and they are crazy because they say, oh, Professor Neumann knows exactly my risk to get metastasis is very, very low, but nevertheless, the transplantation center does not accept me even if I have a living donor. So what is the risk for VHL, Familial disease? Again, a multidiscipline challenge. With the eye tumor, you can reduce the risk for blindness by coagulation of the, mostly in the periphery located retinal angioma. You can, of course, very successfully remove these tiny nodules, and then the cyst will collapse, and this we say is the Lindau tumor, the hemangioblastoma, which produces a cyst, and the cyst mostly kills the patient when it grows more than to this size. And the operation is not so difficult. It becomes more difficult if located in the brainstem or in the spinal cord, or if the patient needs several brain surgeries. I have a patient who had successfully undergone 6 brain surgeries for this disease. The patients with VHL have also a risk for pancreatic islet cell tumor, PNETs, pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors. It's the same disease, but a different word. And the patients have a risk to have metastasis, and we have to balance, not to harm too much. And when you operate this patient, you have to remove the head of the pancreas and most of the pancreas corpus, and then the gallbladder and the duodenum. So it's really a large operation, and recovery is long and so on. So we operate these patients based on our observations in a registry, and for these rare disease you need registries, and then you can compare and see when is the risk really for metastasis. And we have a good relation of tumor size, meaning diameter, and when the tumor, this is a tumor of about 2 centimeter diameter, and when it becomes 3 centimeter, then the risk for metastasis becomes really true. So before 3, we operate these patients, not in this stage. Patients with VHL need surgery also sometimes for Pheochromocytoma. This is histology. this is the tumor, and this is the patient. My first patient is Pheochromocytoma, and this is the sister, and this is her image to see how rapid the progress in imaging of neuro structures has been achieved, and this is nearly impossible to see the small solid tumor in this old CT which she had. Of course, now the question is, can we diagnose the disease for the next generation? And this is similar to the patient which I showed you initially. So this patient wants to be clear for family planning, or to have a good program to have preventive medicine for the next generation. And in fact, it is possible to identify the mutation in this family and to exclude in our initial patient if he has a mutation in the VHL gene. So we do this. The PKD genes, he is on risk for that too, have not been analyzed because he has no polycystic kidney disease, and penetrance for cysts in this disease is very high. And the procedure for molecular diagnosis of the PKD1, here the last PKD1 and PKD2 genes, they are very large genes, it's expensive, time-consuming, and not a 100% mutation hit rate. We should be aware that some of these diseases can be diagnosed but not completely ruled out, and this is important too. Here is the list for familial clear cell cancer, which was the question of my patient, which I showed you. So we do the VHLG testing, it's not finished, and nevertheless show you this case. We have published together with a Polish-Finnish group that renal clear cell carcinoma occurs also in paraganglioma type 4, and the gene is succinate dihydrogenases subunit B, SDHB gene. There are other subunits, and we have recently identified a patient who had a mutation in the SCHC gene and has also familial bilateral renal cancer. It was not familial. So we do testing of SDHB and SDHC, and we do also SDHD since another group has found renal cancer in such a patient. So this is the list of the currently available or known genes which may produce renal clear cell cancer as the patient had. So this is what you can do, molecular and genetic diagnosis of these genes. And of course, we offered the patient to have MR imaging of the abdomen and to see if at all he has kidney tumor. And he has not a kidney tumor. So I think this patient is really safe for himself and most probably for the next generation for any kidney tumor. Okay, so far? So let's go on. 10 minutes over. This is a very famous pedigree. Famous because this is the pedigree of the first patient, as many physicians think, who was diagnosed with Pheochromocytoma. And the diagnosis was when the founder of your university and the man who built this house lived. It was in 1886 published. And it was by a physician who came from Schlesien, from Ratibor, and he worked in Freiburg. So I was interested in this tumor for many times. I felt obliged to work up this case, and I did. So what you can see, here is a patient who had Pheochromocytoma, and here are also patients who had Pheochromocytoma. And this was a published case in 1886, so 2 generations older. And she had 6 brothers, and it is reported everything in the family is okay. And nobody knew that these 2 had also an inherited problem, and one became was 69 and one 79 when dead, and nobody found tumor in any of them. So the next generation, we know this was a patient, and here was were two patients, was also nothing known, but here were two patients. So very far where they lived and the distance, and so nobody nearly forgot that anything wrong was in this family. But there is a pheochromocytoma risk in this family. So you can again see familial pheochromocytoma is possible. Familial pheochromocytoma is a problem for human geneticists because they have to do extended pedigrees to see where the family trees, in the family tree branches are at risk for the tumor. And now a new case. When I was in Hungary last week, believe me or not, my mobile rang. And I said, oh, here, Neumann. And there was a person with a German name. I never had contact before with him. And he said, I'm living in Johannesburg in South Africa. And we have a 13-year-old patient. So it's a true next case. A German person from Johannesburg called me and said, my friends have a 13-year-old boy and the diagnosis is paraganglioma. And we have looked in the internet, we found your name, you have published something for patients. And indeed, I made an information book for patients in German, and it was published by Semmelweis University to Hungary. That was the first translation. Then I asked for a translation to English. I could do it myself, but I wanted to have it perfect, so I paid for that. And from the English translation, there were now translations also in Russian, Persian, Turkey, and so on. So we have 10 languages. But this person read the English version and found my email address, and then he looked at the internet and found my mobile, and oh, he sent an email to me, and the automatic reply showed my mobile. So it came that he called. So this 13-year-old boy has two tumors, and one of these tumors is close to major vessels. And the question was, is it malignant or not? And there was a long, they say, a 5-hour conference with 5 experts in Johannesburg, and they said it's a very big operation, very risky, and we do not know what the outcome will be, if there's major damage to other organs, and so on. And this man spoke with the parents and said, should I try to locate Professor Neumann? And then he asked, what is best treatment? And then the next information, no tumor in the family. So this occurs. And it occurs about once in 2 weeks to me. We had just recently a very similar case from Riga, and we try our best. And the question was, what is the best for this boy? Can they pay? Can they achieve the operation? Is the workup of the pheochromocytoma done well enough? Has he malignant disease or not? What is the risk of the tumor very close to the large vessel? So I tried to make in the telephone conversation for these non-medical field working persons some introductory remarks. My opinion is this boy has not a malignant, he has 2 tumors, he has an inherited condition, he has a tumor close to the aorta and the vena cava inferior, and this is a very typical location for extraadrenal pheochromocytoma, and the best treatment would be endoscopic removal. So the question is, can they pay at least for the flight? And how can we come over the visa problems and so on? We are working on that. We expect the patient next week in Germany, and we do not the operation in Freiburg, we do the operation by Martin Walser in Essen, a close friend. It's 500 kilometers, but for these rare patients, I think the best center is the best for the long-term prognosis. Carcinoma so-and-so, and you see these letters, and so it's confusing. But you should know, the younger the patients are, the higher the likelihood is that they have an inherited condition. And believe me, we have recently worked on childhood-induced pheochromocytoma. We have a very nice collection, as I think. Sorry, sometimes I feel a little bit overestimating my own work. But we have 177 patients with childhood-induced pheochromocytoma in our registry. So I think we can draw conclusions based on this number. And nearly 75% of these patients have an inherited condition. They have a mutation in one of these genes. I showed you already for Pfliegler. You may know neurofibromatosis type 1, but there are also, I showed you this gene and this and this. So a little bit confusing. You should know there is a high risk to have such a mutation. This is multiple endocrine neoplasia type 2. With this uptake in the thyroid, in the neck, and this is bilateral cancer of the thyroid, and this is bilateral pheochromocytoma. And we come now to the point. Why should we know all this? We must create centers where these patients are seen from all directions and are considered interdisciplinary. And one point is to do molecular genetic analysis. But is this procedure important for the treatment of this South African patient or not? And the answer is no, it's not important for next week. Important is only to know where exactly the tumors are. And therefore, in all these patients, we do classical thin slide computed radioimaging. In this case, we do MRI, and we do a scintigraphy to confirm the tumor and to exclude that there is one tumor which has possibly been overlooked. So the surgeon will do only a removal, what I say to him. So he did removal of this tumor. It was in this case an asymptomatic tumor, and we detected it by family investigation. She was the sister of a patient with a known pheochromocytoma. She was completely unhappy when I told her, you have the gene, and do you want clinical investigation? I made a reservation. When I told her she had the gene, then she was totally unhappy, but same day we offered clinical screening to confirm is there something or no, and we found it. And so she knew I was right doing the test. And when she might have pregnancy, she may go in high risk with this tumor. So I told her, be happy, we'll remove it. She was with Martin Walz, and 2 days after the operation, she was home in the Black Forest again. And isn't it completely nice, this story, to know that interdisciplinary medicine can be with wonderful outcome for the patients. And this is this patient, the last, which I showed you. She had only a single incision for removal of this tumor, and this was the father who had bilateral pheochromocytoma. Classical operation, important, well-known surgeon, large scar. That was the old generation. Yeah. So what we did just recently, and we have not submitted the manuscript. I brought it to Hungary to reread and to make corrections because I have the feeling it might be interesting for a major journal, and we all want to have publications in New England or JAMA also. So we want to submit to JAMA, and what we found in these childhood and youth pheochromocytoma patients, like the patient in Johannesburg, is that counting in years, up to 30 years, and the percentage of the patient up to 100% for a second paraganglial tumor, any location, as I have shown you, is reflected for those with Familial disease, SDHB, SDHD, neurofibromatosis, one of the other genes, and those patients who have no mutation. And you see there is a considerable risk to have a second tumor. Not very early, not in the first or second year, but then it goes up and it reaches by 5 years about 20%, and by 10 years about 40% to get a second tumor. So this is a part of planning futures, and a center, a multidisciplinary center who does preventive medicine should be well aware for counseling and for giving information for exact risks to deal with identified mutation. And the risk is different if you have a mutation in this gene or in this gene. And this should be in detail declared and said to the patient, and then you should have a center which is really willing to see these patients 2 or 1 year after the operation to make the controls, to check if they have a second tumor or not. This is all I want to show you, but from last year, some pictures. I saw in your university in the front desk is still this chair, which we brought from Freiburg. I'm very happy, and the person who makes telephone calls and connects with all the physicians is still on the Freiburg chair. And the driver was successfully in loading up his battery and going back from Debrecen. And I have heard there was a happening with the Hammond organ in the next day when I was here to upload this. And yeah, wonderful last visit in Egger. In addition, and you see, you may know better this location than me. And yeah, it was a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.
I would say that thank you very much for this excellent lecture and really showing us the future, and or not the future, the present, which we really appreciate a lot, and there were really interesting cases, and I'm very happy that we did have this cooperation with you. And now we will switch to the second part, to the music. Und wenn Sie es für mich erlauben, möchte ich mal auf Deutsch ein paar Wörter sagen. Die Musik ist auf Deutsch. Und Professor Hartmut Neumann spielt Geige und begleitet am Klavier ist der Bojti. Wo ist sie? Ah ja, bitte? Dann wird Daniel Nagy singen und auch begleitet und Klavier spielt ist der Bojti, und am Ende spielt zum letzten, aber nicht zum letzten, wird mein Kollege Arthur Istvan spielen auf Klavier. So dass, wenn, ich glaube, du willst keine Pause jetzt haben. Eine Pause? Ja, dann ich gebe es für Frau Professorin Oláh. Sie möchte eine kleine Pause, 5 Minuten oder so? Nein? Nein, dann nicht. Ja, dann gehen wir weiter. Ja, nur am Ende. At the end of the whole afternoon there will be this pause. So, Herr Hartmut, bitte. Zu Geige. Wir beginnen zuerst. Erst den Arm, ja? Ja, bitte. Ja, please, jöjjön, legyen kedves akkor. Jöjj, bocsánat. Riadala, utána Balzsák, Kumareszki és Georges Boulanger, Avendúri.
Sorry.
tango c'est Renal. Avant de mourir. Please, no.
Bojti Eszter művésznőnek, Frank, Hartmut Neumann, és most a második rész következik, Nagy Dániel, és ugyancsak Bojti Eszter művésznő, hogy néhány dalt adnak elő, Mozart a Papageno áriája varázsfoglalából, Eugenio De Curtis, Non ti scordar di me, és ugyancsak Lehár Ferenc, Vágyom egy nő után, Szucsongranak.
Ich möchte deinen Augen winken, mit dir zu Füßen sinken. In Frieden allein, wie wunderbar ist ein leuchtendes Land. Komm, schön und sehnsuchtsvoll ist ein strahlender Blick. Fröhlicher Stimmeklang ist so wie Musik. Dein ist mein ganzes Herz, wo du ihn bist, kann ich nicht sein. So wie die Blume hält, wenn sie nicht grüßt, der Sonnenschein. Dein ist mein schönstes Lied, meines allein aus der Liebe blüht. Sag mir doch mein einzig Lieb, oh sag ich einmal ich kann, ich
Köszönjük, hogy üdvözlőnek művészókat, köszönjük a előadást, és akkor a befejező részhez érkezünk, ahol Alkotói István zongorán ülni, és több röviden érezetű, nagyon jól ismert, és nagyon tettek arról, hogy Chopintől, Gershwintől, Petrustől, és végezetül, nekem kedvencem Jerome Kernről, a Szolgó színűről lesz. És ez lesz a befejezés, átadom utána Oláh professzornak, akinek ezúttal is megint újra köszönöm, és köszönjük, és ugyancsak köszönöm Tancs Áginak, akinek a kulturális Köszönöm szépen.
On behalf of all of us, I'd like to thank, first of all, the organizers, firstly Professor Pfliegler. Okay. Who is the head of the Department of Rare Diseases of the Institute of Internal Medicine, and the head of various departments, as was mentioned already, Professor Renal and Professor Jules Massenet for the presence and support. Many thanks, of course, Professor Neumann. He's over there for the exciting lecture of great practical importance and for the beautiful music performance. And thanks to István and Daniel and Eszter Bojti for the nice pieces we had the opportunity to enjoy. It was nice. And finally, I render thanks to the audience for attendance. Let me invite you for a glass of champagne and reception. Azonban mielőtt a falatokhoz és a pesgőhöz jutnánk, engedjék meg, hogy magyarul is elmondjam azt, hogy ezt az estét miért érzem különlegesnek. Az elmúlt időszakban célunk volt az, hogy interdisziplináris összejöveteleket tartsunk. Hát ez aztán igazán interdisziplináris volt szakmai szempontból, hiszen egy olyan határterületről hallottunk, ami az onkológusokat, a genetikusokat, a nefrológusokat, az endokrinológusokat köti össze, egy valamennyiüknek való nagyon izgalmas terület, és ahogy Gyuri említette, igen komoly perspektívát vett föl, különösen ha a új genetikai tesztek lehetőségére, elérhetőségére gondolunk. És hát persze, interdisziplináris volt abból a szempontból is, hogy az orvostudomány és a művészetet, a zenét hozta össze. Én szeretném megköszönni az ötletet Pfliegler professzor úrnak. Azt hiszem, hogy ez a program igazán tükrözte azt, hogy együtt összefogva izgalmassá lehet tenni egy estét. Én nagyon remélem, hogy valamennyien élvezték, és azt is remélem, hogy élvezni fogják a sorolást és a pesgőt, amit gondolom megkapunk. Tessék parancsolni. Hozzuk azonnal. Köszönjük, hogy eljöttél. And I'd like to give you as a gift on the professor's club life.
I learned Hungarian now.
This is a good practice for you.